Never expected his mining supervisor job on station to involve babysitting aliens. But here he was, staring down at the most pitiful sight he'd encountered in his 20 years working the asteroid belt. The Draconis huddled in the corner of Cargo Bay 7 looked nothing like the proud warrior race described in the corporate briefings. This one was small, maybe 4 feet tall, with scales that should have gleamed silver but instead appeared dull and gray. Its wings, which the briefings claimed could span 12 feet, were folded tight against its trembling body. Most disturbing of all were its eyes, large, golden orbs filled with terror that reminded uncomfortably of his daughter's expression during thunderstorms. "Sir," the voice was barely a whisper, coming from the translator device clipped to the creature's throat. "Are you the human supervisor?" Crouched down, making himself less imposing. His knees creaked, a reminder that 45 wasn't young anymore, especially not in the low gravity of the outer rim. "That's me. What's your name?" 4471. The number designation made wince. The Draconis Collective didn't use individual names for their lower castes, treating them more like equipment than people. "How about I call you, that work for you?" The alien's eyes widened in surprise. You would use a shortened designation, but I am only 4th caste maintenance." "Well, around here, everyone gets treated like a person. Now what's got you so scared?" Glanced around the cargo bay nervously, as if expecting threats to emerge from behind the stacked supply containers. "The hegemony enforcers arrived this morning. They seek the location of a stolen ship, the vessel's Dream, the crew. They helped me escape the labor camps on Prime." Felt his stomach drop. The hegemony was bad news, a collection of older alien species that considered humans barely more evolved than chimps. They had money, advanced technology, and a serious attitude problem when it came to lesser species like humans and apparently low-caste Draconis. "These enforcers," said carefully, "they got jurisdiction here. They claim salvage rights on the vessel and retrieval rights on escaped property." The word property made his jaw clench. He'd grown up poor in the Detroit ruins, knew what it felt like to be treated like you didn't matter. But this was something else entirely, an entire caste system that treated sentient beings as equipment. "Well, here's the thing, this is human space under human law. And human law says if you're scared and need help, you get it. No questions asked." His translator crackled as the alien made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a purr. "You would help me, but I have nothing to offer. I am not strong like upper caste Draconis. I cannot fight. I can only repair systems and maintain equipment." "Sometimes that's exactly what's needed." Stood up, decision made. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe while I figure this out." He led through the station's corridors, noting how the alien stayed close to the walls, flinching at every sound. Station wasn't fancy, just a converted asteroid with holes carved out for living and working spaces. But it was home to 3,000 humans and a handful of alien traders. Most importantly, it was governed by the Colonial Mining Consortium, which meant Earth law applied. His office was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the main docking bay. He could see the hegemony ship from here, a sleek vessel that looked like someone had crossed a shark with a cathedral. Impressive and intimidating, exactly what you'd expect from a species that thought it ruled the galaxy. "Sit anywhere you want," told, who perched nervously on the edge of a chair designed for human proportions. "Sir, I must warn you, the enforcers are not reasonable beings. They view humans as primitives if they discover you are harboring me." "Let me worry about that," opened his terminal and started typing. "First things first, let's get you properly registered as a refugee seeking asylum. That'll give us some legal protection." As he worked, spoke quietly about life in the labor camps. The conditions were horrific, 16-hour shifts in toxic environments, minimal food, punishment for the slightest infractions. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones lived for decades in grinding misery. "The crew of Dream wasn't supposed to help us," explained. "But Captain saw the conditions and couldn't leave us there. She said it reminded her of stories her grandfather told about something called the Underground Railroad." Smiled grimly, trust human stubbornness to kick in at exactly the wrong moment. "Sounds like Captain has a good heart. Any idea where her ship is now?" "Hidden in the asteroid field, I believe. But they are running out of supplies. The hegemony has been hunting them for 3 weeks." Before could respond, his communicator buzzed. The voice of Station Chief Administrator crackled through. I need you in conference room A immediately. We have visitors. On my way, he looked at. You stay here, lock the door behind me and don't open it for anyone except me. Got it. Nodded but could see the fear returning to those golden eyes. Sir, if they take me back. They won't, surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. I give you my word. Conference room A was the space on station, which wasn't saying much. The table was genuine earth oak, a luxury in space, and the chairs were actually comfortable. Today it felt more like a courtroom than a meeting room. 3 hegemony enforcers sat on one side of the table, their different species united by matching uniforms and expressions of barely contained contempt. The leader appeared to be a tall, slender, with pale blue skin and completely black eyes. To his right sat what recognized as a built like a professional wrestler but with purple skin and tusks. The third was harder to identify, but looked like someone had crossed an octopus with a philosopher. Administrator sat across from them, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. She was a good administrator, but had never been comfortable with confrontation. Ah, Supervisor, the said, not bothering to stand. I am Enforcer Prime. We are investigating the theft of hegemony property. Property, took a seat next to. What kind of property? A labor unit designated 4471, among others. The unit was stolen from a lawful work facility by criminal elements operating a vessel called Dream. We have reason to believe this unit is currently on your station. The casual way referred to as a unit made want to punch something. Instead, he kept his voice level. I'd need to see some paperwork before I could help with that. His black eyes narrowed. Paperwork? Human, you mistake your position. The hegemony does not answer to primitive mining colonies. Well, that's interesting, said, pulling out his tablet. Because according to the Galactic Commerce Treaty, specifically Section 847B, which the hegemony signed, any law enforcement action in human colonial space requires proper documentation and cooperation with local authorities. The silence that followed was profound, stared at like he'd grown a second head. The enforcers exchanged glances that clearly said they hadn't expected a primitive human to know galactic law. Recovered first. You quote treaties human, but do you understand the consequences of harboring stolen property? I understand the consequences of violating someone's rights, shot back. And under human law, any sentient being requesting asylum gets a fair hearing. The enforcer leaned forward, his tusks gleaming. Perhaps we should discuss this more, privately, Supervisor. It was a threat, pure and simple. Felt his pulse quicken, but years of dealing with corporate executives had taught him not to back down from bullies. I think this conversation is just fine right here, he said. Now about that paperwork. Stood abruptly. You test patience that is not infinite human. We will return tomorrow with proper documentation. I suggest you reconsider your position before then. As the enforcers filed out, turned to with a mixture of admiration and terror. Are you completely insane? Do you know what you just did? Yeah, said, watching the hegemony ship through the conference room window. I bought us some time. But as he walked back to his office, wondered if time would be enough. The hegemony had resources he couldn't match, technology that made human equipment look like stone tools, and a complete disregard for anything they considered beneath them. He found exactly where he'd left him, huddled in the chair like he expected the ceiling to collapse at any moment. How did it go? The alien asked. Well, they didn't arrest me on the spot, so better than expected. Sat down at his desk. They'll be back tomorrow with proper paperwork. That gives us maybe 18 hours to figure something out. There is nothing to figure out, said quietly. They are hegemony, we are not. The mathematics of power is simple. Maybe where you come from, said. But you're in human space now, and humans have a bad habit of ignoring mathematics when it doesn't suit us. He opened his communicator and started making calls. First to legal, to understand exactly what protections galactic law offered. Then to security, to discuss defensive options. Finally, to his old friend Jake, who ran supply logistics and had connections throughout the asteroid belt. As he worked, kept glancing at, who sat perfectly still except for the occasional tremor that ran through his small frame. The alien had probably never encountered a human before coming to station. Everything in his experience would tell him that the strong always won, that resistance was futile, that people like him were meant to suffer in silence. Had grown up in the ruins of Detroit, where corporate overlords treated workers like disposable resources. He'd watched good people ground down by systems that didn't care if they lived or died. But he'd also learned something those corporate overlords never understood. Sometimes the people they wrote off surprised them. Tomorrow, the hegemony would return with their paperwork and their overwhelming technological advantage. They would expect him to hand over without a fight, because that's what primitive colonials were supposed to do when their betters came calling. Smiled as he reached for his communicator again. The hegemony was about to learn something about human stubbornness that wasn't covered in their briefings. And if they were very unlucky, they might also learn why humanity had earned its reputation for doing impossible things when someone they cared about was in danger. Spent the night learning more about galactic law than he'd ever wanted to know. The legal databases were vast and contradictory, filled with treaties, amendments, and exceptions that seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify. But one thing became clear as he dug deeper. The hegemony's position wasn't as solid as they pretended. The Galactic Commerce Treaty did indeed require documentation for law enforcement in foreign space. More importantly, the Refugee Protection Accords, signed after the genocide 30 years ago, explicitly protected sentient beings fleeing persecution. The problem was enforcement. Who would make the hegemony follow rules they'd helped write but clearly didn't respect? His communicator buzzed at 300 hours. "It's Jake, you still awake?" "Unfortunately, please tell me you found something." Jake's gravelly voice carried the satisfaction of a man who'd spent decades working the system. "Oh, I found something all right. That ship they're hunting, Dream, she's registered as an independent cargo hauler out of New Sydney. Captain Sarah, decorated veteran of the conflict. Clean record, no outstanding warrants. That doesn't help us much if the hegemony claims salvage rights. Here's the interesting part. They don't have salvage rights. I checked with my contact at the shipping registry. Dream is current on all payments and certifications. She's not abandoned property, just a ship that happened to be in hegemony space when the captain decided to grow a conscience." "Sat up, you're saying the hegemony is lying about having legal claim to the ship." "Lying might be too strong a word. More like creatively interpreting the law. They're claiming the ship engaged in theft by taking their property. But if that property includes sentient beings who requested asylum, then it's not theft, it's rescue," felt a spark of hope. "Jake, you're beautiful. Where's the ship now?" "Asteroid XK 739, about 6 hours out by fast courier. Is smart. She's hiding in the sensor shadow of a nickel iron deposit, but she's running out of food and water." After ending the call, looked over at, who had somehow managed to fall asleep in the chair. The alien looked even smaller unconscious, his scales dulled with exhaustion. Pulled a blanket from his emergency kit and draped it over the sleeping figure. Dawn on station was an artificial thing. The lights gradually brightened to simulate sunrise for the benefit of human circadian rhythms. Had managed maybe 2 hours of sleep when administrator called an emergency meeting. "The hegemony ship is requesting permission to dock," she informed the hastily assembled senior staff. "They claim they have the proper documentation now." Security chief, a former military police officer who looked like she could bench press a shuttle, studied her tablet. "I've been reviewing our defensive capabilities. We have decent point defense systems, but nothing that could seriously threaten a hegemony cruiser, if they decide to take what they want by force." "They won't," said. "At least not immediately. The hegemony might be arrogant, but they're not stupid. Open aggression against a human colony would bring the colonial defense force into this, and they don't want that fight." "So what do you suggest?" asked. "We follow the law, all of it. Every procedure, every requirement, every bureaucratic step that gives us leverage." Pulled up his research on the main display. "The Refugee Protection Accords require a formal hearing before any asylum seeker can be extradited. That means lawyers, evidence, testimony, the whole process." Chief Medical Officer David Park, who'd been quiet until now, cleared his throat. "I examined our guest this morning while you were sleeping. Malnutrition, chronic stress indicators, evidence of repeated physical trauma. Whatever they did to him in those labor camps qualifies as torture under any reasonable definition." "Will you testify to that?" asked. "Absolutely." Looked around the table. Are we really doing this, standing up to the hegemony over one alien? Thought about's terrified eyes. about Captain risking her ship to save people she'd never met, about all the times in human history when ordinary people had faced impossible odds because it was the right thing to do. "Yeah," he said, "we're really doing this." The Hegemony delegation arrived at noon, their shuttle gleaming with the kind of expensive technology that human colonies could only dream of owning. Enforcer Prime brought two companions this time, the same Enforcer from yesterday, and a new addition that didn't recognize. This one looked vaguely reptilian, with green scales and cold yellow eyes. "Supervisor," said without preamble, "we have the documentation you requested." The papers were impressive: official seals, multiple signatures, dense legal text in several languages. Read them carefully while the enforcers waited with barely concealed impatience. "These are extradition orders," said finally, "not retrieval authorizations for property." "A legal technicality," the reptilian enforcer hissed. "The result is the same." "Actually, it's not. Extradition orders can be challenged under the Refugee Protection Accords. I'm formally requesting a hearing before the colonial magistrate." His black eyes went completely flat. "You cannot be serious." "Dead serious. Article 15 of the Accords specifically states that any sentient being claiming asylum has the right to legal representation and a formal hearing. No exceptions." "Human," the rumbled, "you try patience that has limits." Felt his stomach clench but kept his voice steady. "Are you threatening me, enforcer?" "We are explaining reality," said smoothly. "The hegemony remembers those who cooperate. We also remember those who do not." After the hegemony delegation left, found himself shaking slightly from adrenaline, looked pale but determined. "How long can we stretch the legal proceedings?" she asked. "Maybe a week if we're lucky. The colonial magistrate is on Ceres Station. It'll take 3 days just to get her here." "And if the hegemony gets tired of waiting?" Didn't answer, but they both knew the possibilities. Station's defenses were designed to handle pirates and equipment malfunctions, not military-grade alien warships. That afternoon, made a decision that would either save them all or get them killed. He opened a secure channel to Captain Sarah. "Dream, this is Station Supervisor. Please respond." The wait seemed endless. Then, "Station, this is Captain. Wasn't expecting to hear from you. How's our friend doing?" "Safe for now, but we've got problems. The hegemony is pushing hard for extradition. I'm buying time with legal challenges, but I need you to know they're hunting you specifically. They claim salvage rights on your ship." "Bullshit." His voice carried the authority of someone who'd commanded ships through combat zones. "My ship is legally registered and current on all obligations." "I know. I've been researching their claims all night. Captain, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. How many refugees are we talking about?" A pause. 47. Mostly Draconis, but some in a few species I can't even identify. They were all in the same camps. Felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "Jesus, 47 people. 47 sentient beings who were being worked to death in toxic mines. I couldn't just leave them there. You'd have done the same thing." Maybe he would have. Like to think so anyway. "Captain, I'm going to make you an offer. Bring your ship to station. We'll claim you're here for emergency repairs and resupply. That puts you under our legal protection." "Are you insane? The hegemony will never allow that." "They might not have a choice. International law is pretty clear about ships in distress. And from what Jake tells me, you're running low on supplies." Another long pause. "You know what you're risking. If this goes bad, the hegemony won't just come after you. They'll make an example of your entire station." Thought about his crew, good people who'd signed up to mine asteroids, not fight alien empires. He thought about his ex-wife and daughter back on Earth, who would be devastated if something happened to him. He thought about sleeping fitfully in his office, probably having nightmares about the labor camps. "Captain, 47 people are counting on us to do the right thing. I can't live with myself if I don't try." "All right, you're either the bravest human I've ever met or maybe both. We'll be there in 6 hours." As evening approached, gathered his senior staff for what might be their final planning meeting. Security chief had been working non-stop to prepare contingencies. "I've armed every security officer with the best equipment we have," she reported. "It won't be enough if they bring serious firepower, but we might be able to make them think twice about a boarding action." Chief Park had been busy too. I've documented every medical issue I can find among our refugee population. If this goes to a hearing, I'll have enough evidence to prove systematic abuse." "What about evacuation procedures?" asked. "Limited options," admitted. "We have enough escape pods for the human crew, but not for refugees. The mining shuttles could carry some people, but they're not designed for long-range flight." Looked around the table at faces he'd worked with for years. These were his people, engineers and miners and technicians who'd come to the outer rim to build something better than what they'd left behind on the inner worlds. They didn't deserve to be caught in an interstellar incident over one alien's request for help. "I want everyone to understand," he said quietly, "that if you want to transfer off station before this gets worse, I'll approve it. No questions asked. This isn't your fight." Snorted, "Like hell it isn't. I didn't serve 10 years in the Colonial Marines just to run away from bullies." Park nodded agreement. "I took an oath to help people in need. That doesn't have a species requirement." Was quiet for a long moment. "My grandmother fled the Mars corporate wars in a cargo container, hiding from company security who wanted to arrest her for organizing workers. She used to tell me stories about the ordinary people who helped refugees escape. I always wondered if I'd have that kind of courage." "Looks like you're about to find out," said. As night fell over station, stood in his office window watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Captain was flying toward them with 47 refugees who had no home to return to. Somewhere else, the hegemony was planning their next move in a game where the rules were written by the powerful and enforced by fear. Stirred in his chair, golden eyes opening slowly. "Sir, is it time?" "Time for what?" "To surrender me to the enforcers. I understand. You have done more than anyone could expect. I am grateful for the kindness you have shown." Turned from the window. "Let me tell you something about humans. We're stubborn, we're contrary, and we have a really bad habit of doubling down when smart people tell us to quit." The alien tilted his head, confused. "What I'm saying is, we're not surrendering anyone. Tomorrow, we're going to show the hegemony something they haven't seen before." "What is that?" Smiled, feeling more confident than he had any right to feel. "A bunch of primitive humans who forgot to be intimidated." This dream arrived at station like a ghost ship emerging from deep space. Watched from the command center as the battered cargo vessel limped toward their docking bay, her hull by asteroid impacts and jury-rigged repairs. She wasn't much to look at, but she'd carried 47 souls out of hell, and that made her beautiful in ways the hegemony's pristine warship could never match. Captain Sarah was exactly what it expected, a weathered woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She moved with the careful economy of motion that came from years in space, and when she shook his hand, her grip was firm enough to crack knuckles. "Supervisor, heard a lot about you in the past day." "All bad, I hope." "Depends on your perspective." Glanced around the docking bay, taking in the security teams and hastily erected barricades. "You really think you can hold off the hegemony with mining equipment and good intentions?" "Probably not, but we might not have to. How are your people?" "Scared, tired, grateful to be alive. Most of them have never seen humans before. You're either going to be heroes or the last people they ever meet." The refugees were a heartbreaking sight. They moved slowly down the stream's cargo ramp, clutching small bundles that represented everything they owned in the universe. Saw Draconis-like, their scales dulled by malnutrition and trauma. There were others too, spider-like with nervous, darting movements, and several species he couldn't identify. Dr. Park and his medical team were waiting with emergency supplies. "We've set up a temporary clinic in Cargo Bay 5, he told. "Basic medical screening, food, clean clothes." "They'll appreciate that. Most of them haven't had a proper meal in months." Found among the refugees, and the change was remarkable. Seeing others of his kind had straightened the alien's posture, brought some life back to his golden eyes. "Sir," said when he spotted, "you kept your word. They are safe." "For now, but we've got bigger problems coming." As if summoned by his words, the hegemony cruiser began moving toward the station. Watched on the tactical display as the massive ship positioned itself between station and the nearest jump point, effectively cutting off their escape route. His communicator crackled to life. "Station, this is Enforcer Prime. We demand immediate surrender of all stolen property, including the criminal vessel's dream." Keyed his response carefully. Hegemony vessel, this is Station Supervisor. The ship's Dream has requested emergency docking for humanitarian purposes. We're providing assistance to refugees under the Galactic Refugee Protection Accords. There are no refugees, human, only stolen property and criminal accomplices. You have 1 hour to comply, or we will consider this an act of piracy. The channel went dead, looked at his senior staff, seeing his own grim thoughts reflected in their faces. Piracy, said, they're calling us pirates now. It's a legal maneuver, explained. Piracy gives them justification for military action. They can claim they're protecting galactic commerce. Security chief pulled up the tactical display. That cruiser carries enough firepower to slag this asteroid if they decide to stop playing games. They won't destroy the station, Captain said confidently. Too much political fallout, but a boarding action, that's different. They can claim they're recovering stolen property and rescuing misguided humans from their own poor judgment. How long would we last against hegemony Marines? His expression was grim. Maybe an hour if we're lucky. Their personal armor is better than anything we have, and their weapons are 2 generations ahead of human military hardware. Activated the station-wide communication system. Attention all personnel, this is Supervisor. In approximately 50 minutes we may face an attempted boarding by hostile forces. All non-essential personnel should report to designated safe areas. Security teams implement Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was something they'd developed for dealing with pirate attacks, though no one had ever expected to use it against a major galactic power. The plan was simple: delay and frustrate any boarding action while protecting civilians and key infrastructure. As the crew scrambled to implement emergency procedures, found himself in the station's legal archive, desperately searching for any precedent that might help them. The Galactic Commerce Treaty was vast and complex, layer upon layer of amendments and exceptions that reflected decades of political compromise. Then he found it. Article 1247C, subsection 15, paragraph 9. Buried deep in the legal text was a provision that most people probably never read. Any signatory to the treaty could request arbitration from the Galactic Commerce Commission for disputes involving multiple species. The arbitration request automatically triggered a mandatory cooling-off period during which no military action could be taken. The problem was getting the request filed. The nearest GCC office was 3 systems away, and communications with the hegemony jamming their transmissions would be impossible. Unless opened a secure channel to the mining ship Lucky Strike, currently operating in the outer asteroid belt. Captain was an old friend who owed more than one favor. I need you to do something crazy for me. How crazy are we talking? I'm sending you a legal document. I need you to jump to the Vega system and file it with the Galactic Commerce Commission. Immediately. A pause. What the hell are you involved in? Something that's going to get us all killed if you don't help. Can you do it? Already spinning up the jump drive, send me the file. As uploaded the arbitration request, alarms began sounding throughout the station. On the tactical display, the hegemony cruiser was launching smaller vessels, boarding craft, that moved with the sleek efficiency of predators closing in on wounded prey. All hands prepare for boarding action, announced over the comm system. Repeat, prepare for boarding action. Grabbed his emergency kit and headed for Cargo Bay 5, where the refugees were sheltering. He found chaos, 47 terrified beings huddled together while human security personnel tried to calm them. Dr. Park was moving between groups, providing medical care and reassurance in equal measure. How are they holding up? Asked. About as well as you'd expect. Most of them are convinced they're about to die. Spotted near the center of the group, standing protectively near several smaller Draconis who looked even younger than he did. I need to ask you something. The alien approached cautiously. Sir. In the labor camps, did you ever see hegemony military operations? How they conduct boarding actions? His eyes widened. Yes, sir. When prisoners attempted escape, they would send enforcers to retrieve them. They use stun weapons primarily. They want their property undamaged. That was useful information. Stun weapons were less lethal than projectile weapons, but they were also less effective against human physiology. Most alien stun technology was calibrated for their own species' nervous systems. The station shuddered as the first boarding craft attached to their hull. could hear the high-pitched whine of cutting torches working through the airlock seals. "Here they come," his voice crackled over the comm. "Deck 7, Section C, multiple contacts, heavy armor, energy weapons." The sounds of combat began echoing through the station's corridors, the sharp crack of human projectile weapons answered by the distinctive hum of alien energy discharge. Knew his security teams were fighting a losing battle, but every minute they bought was precious. His communicator buzzed with an urgent message from "Document filed. GCC acknowledges receipt. Arbitration request has been accepted and all parties." Almost whooped with joy. Instead, he opened a channel to the hegemony forces. "Enforcer Prime, this is Supervisor. I'm transmitting Galactic Commerce Commission document 7745 Delta. Please acknowledge receipt." The fighting stopped abruptly. Could imagine the confusion among the hegemony troops as their commanders tried to figure out what was happening. His voice came over the comm a few minutes later, and for the first time since this all began, he sounded uncertain. "Supervisor, what is the meaning of this document?" "It's an official request for arbitration under Article 1247C of the Galactic Commerce Treaty. As you know, such requests trigger an immediate ceasefire until the Commission can review the case. This is a delaying tactic. This is the law, the same law your government helped write and signed with great ceremony. Are you saying the hegemony doesn't honor its treaties?" The silence stretched for long minutes. Could picture the frantic communications between and his superiors, trying to figure out how a primitive human mining supervisor had just them with their own legal system. Finally responded, "Very well, hegemony forces will withdraw pending Commerce Commission review. However, this changes nothing. You are merely postponing the inevitable." Maybe, but postponement is sometimes all you need. As the hegemony boarding craft detached from the station, felt the tension leave his shoulders for the first time in days. They'd won a reprieve, not a victory, but it was something. Captain found him in the command center, looking exhausted but impressed. That was either brilliant or insane, maybe both. "Any idea how long commission arbitration usually takes?" "Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on how backed up their docket is." Studied the tactical display, where the hegemony cruiser had pulled back to a safer distance. Of course, they could always claim some emergency justification for ignoring the arbitration order. "Let them try. Every hour we delay, more people hear about this. And humans have always been good at making noise when someone tries to push us around." In Cargo Bay 5, the refugees were celebrating in their own quiet way. For the first time since the crisis began, saw hope in their faces instead of despair. Approached him with something that might have been a smile. "Sir, is it true? Are we safe?" "For now, but I want you to understand something. This isn't over. The hegemony isn't going to give up just because we outsmarted them once." "I understand, sir, but for today we are alive and free. That is more than any of us dared hope for yesterday." Looked around at the refugees, beings who had suffered unimaginable hardships yet still found reasons to hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts by the hegemony to reclaim what they considered their property. But tonight, 47 souls were safe under human protection, and that had to count for something. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small drama playing out around station. But for standing among beings who had risked everything for freedom, those stars seemed a little brighter than before. 3 days into the arbitration period, learned that buying time was sometimes more dangerous than fighting. The hegemony cruiser maintained its position just outside station's defensive perimeter, a constant reminder that their reprieve was temporary. Worse, 2 more hegemony vessels had arrived during the night, officially claiming to be observers ensuring compliance with galactic law. 3 ships, security chief muttered, studying the tactical display. "That's enough firepower to sterilize half this asteroid field." "They're trying to intimidate us," said, though he felt the pressure himself. "The more ships they bring, the more attention this gets, and attention is our best weapon right now." The attention was considerable. News of the standoff had reached the inner worlds, sparking heated debates in colonial assemblies and corporate boardrooms. Human rights organizations were calling a hero. Corporate interests were calling him a dangerous radical. The hegemony was claiming he was a pirate and terrorist who had kidnapped their lawful property. In the middle of this galactic circus, 47 refugees were trying to build new lives in the cargo bays and converted storage areas of station. Found himself spending more time with them, learning their stories, understanding what they'd survived. Had emerged as an unofficial leader among the Draconis refugees, despite his low caste status. The others looked to him for guidance, perhaps because he'd been the first to trust humans with his life. Today found him in the improvised workshop where several refugees were repairing station equipment. "Sir," said, looking up from a complex piece of mining machinery, "I have been thinking about your legal strategy." "Oh, what about it?" "The hegemony claims we are property, yes. But if we can prove we are citizens of another government, then their ownership claims become invalid." Blinked, in all his legal research, he'd focused on refugee law and asylum procedures. He hadn't considered the citizenship angle. "You might be onto something, but what government would claim you?" "Perhaps," said carefully, "one that values competence over birth designation." It took a moment to understand what the alien was suggesting. "Are you asking about human citizenship? Is such a thing possible for beings like us?" Felt excitement building. The colonial charter was deliberately broad in its citizenship provisions, designed to attract settlers from any species willing to contribute to colonial development. If the refugees could claim human colonial citizenship. "Let me make some calls," said. The first call was to who was dealing with a flood of legal inquiries from across human space. "Citizenship? Are you serious? The paperwork alone would take months." "What about emergency citizenship? For beings contributing essential services during a crisis." Paused. "There might be precedent for that. The corporate wars generated a lot of emergency legislation. Let me check." The second call was to Dr. Park, who was documenting the refugees' medical histories for the arbitration hearing. "David, I need you to document something else. Every piece of technical work these people have done since arriving. Every repair, every improvement, every contribution to station operations." "Why?" "Because I might have found a way to make this permanent." The third call was to Jake, who had connections throughout the asteroid belt mining community. "Jake, how many mining stations are short-handed right now?" "Most of them. Good technicians are hard to find out here. Why?" "Because I might be able to find you some very good technicians." While worked the legal angles, Captain was dealing with more immediate problems. The hegemony vessels were conducting routine patrols that brought them dangerously close to the station's defensive perimeter. It was intimidation, pure and simple, but it was also effective. "They're testing our resolve," explained during the evening staff meeting. "Every time they get a little closer, they're measuring our response. Eventually, they'll find an excuse to claim we fired first." "What about the arbitration order?" asked. "The Commerce Commission is 3 systems away. By the time they investigate any violations, this could all be over." Looked around the table at faces that showed the strain of 3 sleepless days. His people were holding up, but barely. The hegemony had time and resources on their side. Station had determination and legal technicalities. It wasn't enough. "There's something else," said quietly. "I've been monitoring communications traffic. The hegemony is calling in favors with other species. The collective just announced they're sending a ship to assist with law enforcement. The Empire is expressing concern about human interference in internal hegemony affairs." "How long before they arrive?" 2 days, maybe 3. Felt the walls closing in. What had started as a confrontation between human colonials and hegemony enforcers was becoming an interstellar incident. Earth's government would eventually have to choose between supporting a remote mining station or maintaining diplomatic relations with major galactic powers. That evening found himself in the observation deck, staring out at the stars and trying to find solutions that didn't exist. Approached quietly, moving with the careful grace that seemed natural to his species. "Sir, you look troubled." "We're running out of options. I'm sorry. I thought we could find a way through this." "You have done something no one else would even attempt. That matters, regardless of the outcome." Turned to face the alien. In the 3 days since the crisis began, had somehow grown more confident, more assured. The terrified refugee who had begged for protection was becoming something else entirely. "What will you do if they take you back?" "The same thing I have always done, survive, but now I know something I did not know before." "What's that?" I know that some beings will fight for others, even when they gain nothing by it. That knowledge cannot be taken away. Before could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. He ran to the command center, where was coordinating responses to multiple sensor contacts. What is it? New arrivals, multiple ships coming in fast from 3 different vectors. On the tactical display, watched as 6 new contacts appeared at the edge of sensor range. His heart sank. If the hegemony had brought overwhelming force, there would be no more legal maneuvers, no more delaying tactics. Then Jake's voice crackled over the communications array. Station, this is Captain aboard Lucky Strike. We're here to provide assistance. Jake, what the hell are you doing here? Bringing backup. You didn't think word of this wouldn't spread through the mining community, did you? Stared at the display as the contacts resolved into recognizable ships. Lucky Strike, Deep Prospector, Asteroid Runner, New Frontier, Iron Mountain, and Star Seeker. 6 independent mining vessels whose captains had decided that what happened to Station mattered to all of them. This is insane, breathed. Those are civilian ships. Civilian ships with mining charges and salvage equipment, pointed out. Not exactly warships, but not helpless either. The hegemony response was immediate and predictable. Enforcer Prime's voice cut across all communication channels. Human vessels, you are interfering in a lawful law enforcement operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Jake's response was equally direct. Hegemony ship, this is Captain. We're here to provide humanitarian assistance to fellow humans and refugees. That's perfectly legal under galactic law. You are harboring stolen property. We're protecting people who asked for help. There's a difference. What followed was a tense standoff as 6 mining ships took defensive positions around Station. They were outnumbered, but their presence changed the tactical situation completely. The hegemony could no longer claim they were dealing with isolated pirates or criminals. This was now a confrontation between alien military forces and human civilians, with potential implications for colonial relations throughout the galaxy. Opened a secure channel to the mining captains. I can't ask you to do this. If shooting starts, those hegemony ships will cut through us like paper. Nobody's asking you to ask, Captain replied. We're here because it's the right thing to do. Besides, you think the colonial government will just ignore it if the hegemony massacres human civilians. The Colonial Defense Force is already mobilizing, Captain Susan of the Star Seeker added. Word is, there's a squadron of destroyers 2 days out. The brass might not want to fight, but they can't ignore an attack on colonial installations. So what's the play? Asked. Looked at the tactical display, where human and alien ships faced each other across the void. 9 ships total on the human side, versus 3 hegemony vessels with more arriving soon. The math wasn't in their favor, but mathematics had never been humanity's strong suit when lives were on the line. We buy time, he said. Every hour we delay is another hour for the politicians to find a solution that doesn't involve shooting, and if they can't find one, then we make sure history remembers why this happened, finished. 47 beings who asked for help and the humans who decided that was enough. In Cargo Bay 5, the refugees watched human ships position themselves between their sanctuary and the forces that would drag them back to slavery. Many of them had never seen military action before, but they understood what was happening. Humans they'd never met were risking their lives for strangers who couldn't offer anything in return except gratitude. Found in the command center as the standoff stretched through the night. Sir, there is something you should know about my people. What's that? In the old stories before the hegemony conquest, we had a word. It means debt that cannot be repaid. When someone saves your life at great cost to themselves, you owe them. You don't owe us anything. That is not how it works. It is not about debt in your human sense. It is about loyalty, about choosing to stand with those who stood with you. His golden eyes met. If you will have us, sir, then we choose to stand with humanity, forever. Felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of responsibility that went far beyond his job description as mining supervisor. These beings weren't just refugees anymore. They were allies who had chosen to trust human promises in a galaxy where such promises often meant nothing. Outside, alien warships waited in the darkness, confident in their superior technology and ancient authority. Inside Station, Humans and refugees worked together to strengthen defenses and prepare for whatever came next. Neither side understood yet what was really happening. This wasn't just about asylum law or property rights or political jurisdiction. This was about something much older and more fundamental, the moment when ordinary people decided that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. The end began with a message that changed everything. Was in his office, reviewing emergency citizenship applications for the refugees, when his communicator buzzed with an encrypted transmission from Colonial Command. The voice of Admiral Torres, commander of the Colonial Defense Force, carried the weight of authority and barely controlled anger. Supervisor, this is Admiral Torres. I understand you've managed to create an interstellar incident. Admiral Ice. I'm not finished. 3 days ago, you were a mining supervisor dealing with a simple refugee situation. Now I have 7 hegemony warships, 4 cruisers, and 2 battleships converging on your position. The Galactic Commerce Commission is demanding explanations. Earth's government is in emergency session, and half the colonial worlds are choosing sides. Felt his stomach drop. Ma'am, we followed proper legal procedures. You did more than that. You reminded every species in the galaxy that humans don't back down when someone needs help. Do you have any idea how many messages Colonial Command has received in the past 6 hours? No, ma'am. 43 colony worlds have declared their support for station. The miners on Prometheus are threatening to strike if the refugees are returned to slavery. The agricultural worlds are offering sanctuary to any being seeking freedom from oppression. Torres paused. Supervisor, you've accidentally started a movement. Before could respond, new alarms sounded throughout the station. On the tactical display, massive energy signatures were emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Ships appeared one by one, sleek Colonial Defense Force destroyers, their hulls by battles along the frontier. Ma'am, are those your ships? The Advanced Squadron of Task Force Liberation. I'm aboard the Independence and will be in weapons range in approximately 4 hours. Stared at the display as more ships continued to appear. Task Force Liberation. The politicians needed a name that tested well in focus groups. Between you and me, half the colonial worlds would secede from Earth rather than hand over those refugees. Your little stand has become a symbol of everything we came out here to build. The hegemony response was swift and predictable. Enforcer Prime's voice cut across all communication channels with barely controlled fury. Colonial vessels, you are interfering in internal hegemony affairs. Withdraw immediately. Admiral Torres' reply was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring every ship in the system could hear her words. Hegemony forces, this is Admiral Torres commanding Task Force Liberation. We are here to protect human colonial interests and provide humanitarian assistance to refugees. Any attack on civilian installations will be considered an act of war. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Found himself holding his breath, waiting for the first shot that would turn their desperate stand into a shooting war. Around him, his staff watched their displays with the same tense anticipation. Then Jake's voice broke the silence. Well, I'll be damned. Looks like the cavalry arrived after all. On the tactical display, the human ships were taking defensive positions around station. Not aggressive formations, but clear statements that any attack would have to go through them first. It was a classic human approach, making the enemy decide if they really wanted a fight. In Cargo Bay 5, the refugees watched the massive warships position themselves as shields between the station and the hegemony fleet. Dr. Park was moving among them, providing medical care and answering questions as best he could. Are those ships here to protect us? A young Draconis asked in broken standard. Yes, Park replied simply. They're here because some things are worth fighting for. Found in the workshop, where the alien was working on a complex piece of mining equipment despite everything happening around them. His hands moved with practiced precision, but could see the tension in his posture. How are you holding up? I am trying to stay busy, sir. When I work, I do not think so much about what might happen. I need you to understand something. Whatever happens here, whatever decisions get made at the political level, you and your people are safe. The Colonial Defense Force doesn't abandon people under their protection. You are certain of this? As certain as I can be about anything. Sat down on a nearby crate. Can I ask you something? In all your time in the labor camps, did you ever think you'd be free? His hands stilled on the equipment. No, sir. Freedom was a concept from the old stories, something that existed before the hegemony conquest. But here you are. Yes, here I am in a human space station, protected by human ships, working alongside human engineers. His golden eyes met. It is still difficult to believe. His communicator buzzed with an urgent message from, "Get to conference room A now." He found the senior staff gathered around the main display, which showed a single hegemony shuttle approaching the station's docking bay. What's this about? Enforcer Prime is requesting a face-to-face meeting, reported. Says he has new instructions from the Hegemony Council. Could be a trap, warned. Get you into a room and claim you attacked them. Or it could be a genuine attempt at negotiation, countered. With all those warships watching, they'd have to be insane to try something openly hostile. Looked at the display, where human and alien fleets faced each other across the void like ancient armies preparing for battle. Thousands of lives hung in the balance, waiting for politicians and commanders to decide whether this crisis could be resolved through diplomacy or violence. Set up the meeting, he said. Conference room A, full security presence. If wants to talk, we'll talk. Enforcer Prime arrived with a single aide, moving through station's corridors with the careful dignity of someone who knew they were being watched. Met them in conference room A, accompanied by and Captain. Supervisor, said without preamble, you have created a situation that serves no one's interests. I've protected people who asked for help. That seems to serve their interests pretty well. 47 individuals against the stability of galactic commerce. Is this mathematics you truly support? Leaned back in his chair. Let me tell you about human mathematics, Enforcer. We don't measure worth by numbers. We measure it by whether we can sleep at night knowing we did the right thing. His black eyes showed what might have been frustration. The Hegemony Council has authorized me to make an offer. Full pardons for all humans involved in this incident. Compensation for any damages or expenses. Safe passage for the ship's dream. In exchange for the return of stolen property. You mean the refugees? I mean lawful property of the hegemony, acquired through legitimate commercial transactions. Captain leaned forward. Commercial transactions? You mean conquest and slavery? I mean established legal frameworks that have governed galactic commerce for centuries. Felt anger building in his chest but kept his voice level. And if we refuse? Then you face the consequences of defying established authority. The hegemony remembers its friends, Supervisor. It also remembers its enemies. Is that a threat? It is a statement of reality. The room fell silent for a long moment. Could hear the faint hum of the station's life support systems, the distant sounds of people going about their business, the quiet conversations of refugees building new lives in makeshift quarters. Enforcer, said finally, let me explain something about human reality. Those beings you call property, they've just applied for emergency citizenship in the Colonial Alliance. Their applications are being processed under wartime provisions that give us authority to grant immediate protective status to anyone contributing essential services during a crisis. His expression didn't change, but his aide shifted nervously. You cannot simply declare ownership of hegemony property. We're not declaring ownership. We're recognizing citizenship. There's a difference. Pulled out his tablet and activated the display. As of 2 hours ago, all 47 refugees are provisionally recognized as Colonial Alliance citizens under Emergency Decree 847. That makes them human citizens with all the protections that entails. This is a legal fiction. This is the law. Your government recognizes Colonial Alliance sovereignty, just like we recognize hegemony sovereignty. You can't have it both ways. The silence stretched for several minutes while processed this development. Could see the calculations running behind those black eyes, weighing options and consequences. Even if this legal maneuver is accepted, said finally, it changes nothing fundamental. The hegemony will remember this insult. Good, said. Remember it every time you think about enslaving people. Remember that somewhere out here humans are watching, and we have a really bad habit of showing up when someone needs help. After the hegemony delegation left, found himself back in the observation deck, watching the alien ships begin their withdrawal from the system. Not a retreat, exactly, but a recognition that the political situation had changed beyond their ability to control through force. Admiral Tor's voice came over his communicator. "Supervisor, you might want to see this." The main display showed news feeds from across human space. Colonial worlds celebrating the successful defense of station. Mining communities declaring their support for refugee protection. Political leaders calling for expanded humanitarian programs. Corporate executives complaining about interference with established trade relationships. "It's bigger than just your station now," Tors explained. "The Colonial Alliance Council is meeting in emergency session to formalize new policies on refugee protection. Earth's government is being forced to choose between colonial interests and maintaining diplomatic relationships with species that practice slavery." "What do you think they'll choose?" "I think you reminded them why we came out here in the first place, to build something better than what we left behind." In Cargo Bay 5, the refugees were celebrating in their own quiet way. Official citizenship documents were being processed, but more importantly, they were no longer hiding, approached with something that might have been a smile. "Sir, I have news. The workshop supervisor position on mining station Prometheus is available. They have offered it to me." "That's wonderful. You'll do great." "I wanted to thank you, sir, for showing me that freedom is not just a story from the old days." Looked around at the refugees, his people now, citizens of the Alliance he'd spent his life helping to build. They were scattered throughout the cargo bay, talking quietly, making plans, beginning to hope for futures they'd never dared imagine. "Let me tell you something my grandmother used to say. Freedom isn't something you get given. It's something you choose every single day. You chose to ask for help when you were scared. Captain chose to risk her ship for people she'd never met. My crew chose to stand up to an empire rather than compromise their principles." "And you, sir, what did you choose?" Smiled, feeling tired but satisfied. "I chose to trust that humans are better than our worst impulses, and you know what? I was right." 6 months later, received a message from the Draconis resistance movement, a new organization formed by former slaves who had found freedom in human space. They were helping others escape the labor camps, providing safe passage through human colonies, working to document conditions in hegemony territory for galactic human rights organizations. The message was simple. Thank you for showing us that some beings will fight for others, even when they gain nothing by it. That knowledge cannot be taken away. Outside his office window, could see the construction crews working on station's expansion. New docking bays for refugee transport ships. Additional living quarters for beings seeking asylum. A proper medical facility to help survivors recover from their ordeals. The hegemony had kept their word about remembering. They'd imposed trade sanctions on human colonies, restricted access to certain hyperspace routes, made diplomatic life difficult for Earth's ambassadors. But they'd also stopped raiding colonies for slave labor, knowing that every raid might bring human ships to defend the defenseless. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't enough, but it was a start. And sometimes, thought as he watched another refugee transport dock at his station, a start was all you needed to change the galaxy.